Hello, good morning, and we're here for one more session of the Grandma's March. This is a collective weaving on feminine wisdom, honoring our grandmothers, our wise women, and all women of the world, because, yeah, especially this month to celebrate International Women's Month or Day. So we have today's very special guest, Elaine Dennis, and thank you, Elaine, for being here. I'm really happy because I know we are sisters through the Shakti Fellowship and different cohorts, different times, but I guess we got very connected because our projects, they have lots of things in common and a lot of inspiration through ancestors. And I know you have a beautiful story with your own grandmother. But before we go there, I just want to tell everybody a little bit about you and introduce you. But of course, you're the one sharing your story. I just want to just say some things about you. And I know you have a purpose in life that is to really spark healthy growth in people and organizations. And that is beautiful because I know through your consulting company and everything you do, you really support that and help weaving together ancient wisdom and deep soul searching. So you guide people and companies in that purpose advisory, spark coaching, and awakening experiences so they are able to sustain healthy growth and the positive impact they desire to have in the world. And you are the founder of that beautiful company. It's called Kindred Lane. And I know you have an own methodology that you can tell us more about it. And yeah, that's what I guess I wanted to share about you. And welcome today for
Thank
us to have
you.
this nice chat. I know we have been trying and trying, and we
We did
finally
it.
made
We're
it
here.
out. We did it. I'm really happy you're here. So
Thank you.
yeah, tell us a
I'm
little bit
happy to be part
about.
of it.
Oh, thank you. And tell us a little bit about your story, how and your journey, and how has all this your grandma's and ancestral wisdom has inspired you and to be the woman you are, the amazing woman you are today, and especially the work that you do in the
Mm,
world.
thank you. Well, I'll share a little bit and then you can guide us in which direction you want to go.
Sure.
Um, let's see, I live in Atlanta, Georgia, but I grew up in Virginia. And my, I have, two sisters and wonderful parents, but I was lucky enough to have my grandparents live about 5 minutes away from us growing up. And that was just such a rich part of my childhood that I long for my children. And something I think about so much and just how it shaped me into who I am. My mom's parents, Nani and Poppy, as we called them, and they never missed an opportunity to teach us everything. We would go over there, stop by after school, or drop off groceries, or just, we would pop in and pop out. And obviously we would stay for longer visits too, but it just felt like they were always so intentional with what they shared, and everything was an opportunity for learning. It was a teaching moment. And they were, I think about it a lot, they were really equipping us for challenging times like what we find ourselves in now globally. Just how do you stay grounded and true to who you are amidst the waves of whether it's peer pressure and social convention, or it's something more serious and life threatening. They just always would share stories, their own stories, and their stories of their parents and grandparents. And I have to say, as a child, I wasn't always paying attention. Sometimes when I think of those stories, I'm thinking about the little chairs that were by the fireplace and how I would love to rock in them and tip them over. So, but when I think of those memories, I can see, I can smell I can smell the room. I can feel the texture of the blanket that I would, sit with with my grandmother, and they would say, don't slide on that. Your grandmother made that, and it was woven from this, and she grew up here, like everything, the story was baked into it. So as I've kind of grown up and gone on my own journey, which I'd say, I think we have to go off the path a little bit to find our way back on, right? If we just go on the trail that's already cut, then it's not our own path. And so I've definitely veered off the path sometimes, I'd say, which may not be as relevant for today. But what I'd say is I spent 12 years of my working career in the corporate world, and really working with big companies and helping executives, executive recruiting, leadership consulting. And I think I lost myself a bit in that time of just anchoring to who I am and why I'm here. I just got so focused on what I was doing in the moment and not why I was doing it.
Yeah.
And it took me a little bit of, getting, and I say I got lost in that, but I think what I got, the need for achievement and the validation and the, if you get, this position, then you'll be making this much money.
Right.
And if you, right. So I kind of got into that, climbing the ladder and achievement. And I think somewhere in the course of that, I lost sight of that grounding and, the really what was like my root system that I had taken for granted as a child. My grandparents had passed away, in the early 2000s. And so, after that time, I just felt maybe a little more uprooted. And it was about 5 years ago that I had this real visceral experience. It was the last week of January in 2016. And there's a whole story of everything that was happening, but one of the real important pieces that relates to this conversation is that I went through an exercise with a small group of people in the company where I worked, who were all talking about purpose-driven leadership, purpose-driven companies, sustainability. And I had brought this group together, and we were really working on what this could become.
Yeah.
And in the course of that conversation, we were talking a lot about our values. And I had this moment where I felt my grandparents' presence in the room. And I could see and feel the words that they ingrained in me. And it was this very visceral experience. There are a lot of other details of what happened that week that still make that the most poignant time in my life. And honestly, that week has determined the work that I've done since, like more than any other week in my life.
Before and after, wow, yes.
But the realization I had was that I had not been living from my roots, and I could feel the different roots, like they were coming back to life. And the root from my maternal grandmother, the root from my maternal grandfather, the root from my paternal grandmother, the root from my paternal grandfather. I could feel like each one of them and what they equipped me with, that I couldn't fully put into words, but I could feel that coming back in. And the lesson to me that came in that time, and that has led to everything I've done since, and led to me leaving that company and starting Kindred Lane, and really how I parent, how we live, this life move that we're in the midst of, just all of it comes back to this concept of we have to live from our roots and soak up the sun. And I had this realization that we're all like trees. And if we live from our roots, our values, our purpose, if we're in touch with our ancestral roots, and I can talk more about that, and then we have to take care of ourselves. We have to soak up the sun. We have to let the water in through the root system. We have to nourish ourselves with, like that's how the plants grow.
Yeah.
Right. And we have to do that. And so it was this very simple but profound moment of reconnecting with that part of me that I'd been more disconnected from.
Mm.
And reconnecting with that part of me made so much come into vision and into clarity.
Wow. So, oh my God, that is so beautiful. I relate so much to that because I had a similar experience, presencing my two
Yep, in an
grandmothers.
airplane, right?
Yes, in an airplane,
Yeah.
and it's very clear message of what you have to do from now, and from that all it started, all this journey, and this is why we're here today. But then, so was that the moment that after all that, the Kindred Lane was founded, and why that name and why the methodology? Just tell us a
Yeah.
bit more. I'm curious because it's so beautiful the way everything was just, built it and it started from that presence moment that, yeah, it was amazing.
Yeah, so there was what happened that week, and
Uh-huh.
then the past 5 years has been me trying to figure out what happened.
Yes, what I'm gonna do with this.
So at first, um, well, so there was gathering that group, and I think the impact of that group being a group of people in community together who had shared values and intention to connect with our values and how that work could have a positive impact in the world. And I had not kind of made that connection of values, work, impact in community with others in a way that was incredibly grounding. Then I had also done some executive coaching that week and really digging in and more self-awareness on the personal level. So there's kind of what was happening with me, unpacking some of the stories and just, what I'd kind of not been spending time thinking about. So on the personal level, the community, and then as I was saying, like the societal impact, that through line. And then I went back to Atlanta after that meeting, and I went back to a yoga class because I had just had my second child 9 months before. I was very depleted. I came out of the yoga class. I saw roots juices, and I had been feeling this connection to roots. There was a lot of conversation of unearthing things and getting to the, digging deeper. And I had mentioned to the group a few days before, like, anyone else notice we're talking about trees a lot? And
Roots.
everyone else was like, "Wait, whatever, And so I come out of the yoga class, I see roots juices, and I'm like, I got to go in there. And I had wanted to do a juice cleanse, and so I ended up doing a 3-day juice cleanse.
Uh-huh.
And it was on the third day of the juice cleanse that I now refer to it as my Shakti awakening. That's when all this wisdom really came in. And I think I was just in a state that I had been so depleted, and all of a sudden this all came in. I ended up getting pregnant with our third son during that awakened state. His name is Forrest. Clearly I needed to be a tree name. But so honestly, during this week, I was writing everything. I was having these visions. Everything was just so clear. And so a lot of that what I was drafting has become Kindred Lane. But immediately after that, I just was obsessed with trees. And I was talking to everyone about how purpose is like in the roots, and we have to connect to the roots. And people at my company were like, what happened to Elaine? Like, she is like obsessed with trees. Like, what's going on with her? So I did not start Kindred Lane until actually it was 3 years ago on International Women's Day, March 8th, 2018, that I actually started Kindred Lane. So it was about 2 years that I was figuring out what this seed, this intention, this seed of Kindred Lane wanted to be. And I realized that the company where I was not the fertile ground for that. I was trying to push something that they were not asking for. And it's much better to do that when the company you work for is asking for
Right.
it.
Yeah.
I had to finally accept that reality. And so then I took some time, and Kindred Lane grew. So Kindred Lane, the name, is about being in community with kindred spirits and on our path of purpose. It's also about the red thread of kindness that unites us when we come together with shared values and this intention to have a positive impact when we're rooted in love. And so that's really the seed and the intention, is that we each have our own individual journey. And when we're in community with kindred spirits focused on how our purpose manifests on our path to impact, that everything else is possible. And that's really the seed of what I came into that week, the last week of January 2016. But it took me a while to find the words and not just like talk about like, you gotta just trees, everyone, trees, it took me a while to find the language. I was like the mad scientist, like, I've got it. I've got the, so we have to laugh at ourselves, right?
Yeah, right.
But honestly, so Kindred Lane started 3 years ago, and we just started testing things and putting things out there that really spoke to what I felt I was needing on a personal level, and what is deeply, what's deeply personal is also universal. And so we were kind of finding the connections between it. It was me at the time, now me with my co-founder, Scott Peebles, who came on shortly after. But for me at the time, it was about what was my personal experience and how does that relate to the universal truths. And then Scott came on and we started to dig more into the spiritual traditions across the world, to the research I had done in businesses, purpose-driven businesses, with ancient wisdom traditions and spiritual traditions, a lot of which we talk about in Shakti, right?
Yes.
And so there's that, and then just our own personal journeys and looking at our journeys, and when we let go and we just surrender to the flow of nature, what happens? And we started to chart and look at that for ourselves, and when we would get together in groups and do that, and we started to notice this rhythm that uncovered. And so that became the wisdom of the forest methodology. And it really has 3 parts. It's reconnect with self, reconnect with one another, and reconnect with nature. And so it's really that individual journey, that inclusive community on purpose, and nature being that systems lens of how we impact society, is really returning to nature. And it all comes from living from our roots. And so that's the core, the essence, like the essential truth of the work, is that we have to live from our roots and soak up the sun to grow and thrive and have an impact, a positive impact in the world.
I love it. And wow, because I live also. I live and I work in the corporate world, because I think my life is all through that. And I can see how it's difficult to bring some of this ancient wisdom into that world, into that system that is already heavy, and it has its own way of being, let's say. And like you said, you were in another company, and it's like, no, they don't want to know about this, and this is not the place. But now you help other companies, or maybe it's more than the companies, even leaders that are open to that. How does it work? How do you feel? What companies are ready to accept these things? And what is the difference? Is the leadership that is there? I'm curious, because it's not easy in this corporate world that they are open to something so special.
Yeah, so the company I worked for was great for a lot of reasons, and I was also very stubborn for my own reasons. I might still be, but I think the disconnect was that I was so fueled by what I saw and the vision I saw that I lost sight of what they were asking. I think a lot of times companies have a challenge with this, or larger companies, because it's a built environment. Right? Things are built. The buildings themselves are built. They are structures. They are large structures. The organizations, we kind of connect people with boxes and lines, and some of that has to happen for process and flow and systems to operate, right? But they don't replicate nature, right? on my journey, I've learned about biomimicry and how, just when we are in tune with nature and mimic nature, then it's more regenerative and sustainable. And what I've learned is that for myself, when I tap into my intuition, when I let go of the shoulds and the agenda that I'm forcing, and I just get in touch with what's guiding me, my ancestral wisdom, but also my true nature, which is informed by that, right? Just like the oak tree came from the acorn that came from the oak tree that came from the acorn, right? Like I am the seed that came from my ancestors. And so that intuition, my connection with God, spirit, universe, whatever we call it, right? Divine Mother, Shakti, we all have our own different words, but those are all just different languages, I believe, to speak about the same phenomenon. And so our companies aren't set up to really allow that to just naturally flow because it's messy. It's simple, but it's also messy, right? Because it's iterative and it grows. You don't know exactly how that oak tree is going to look, right? Because you don't know how the wind's going to shape it, and we don't have that flexibility built into our companies. And so
nature, and I don't see that in systems in companies, everything is like, okay, they just want to go this direction.
Right.
Nature.
Well, so the work that Kindred Lane does, that I do, and now Scott and I do, and it's the two of us in the company, but then we work with a collaborator network of kindred spirits and practitioners that offer different magic and different, areas of expertise, from, inclusion building and, the Shakti work that Neelima brings in, or empathy building, or biomimicry. We team with people that can go deeper in a lot of different directions to bring the methodology to life. But what we do is we use the metaphor of a garden. It's like growing a garden outside the structure. So if you think about, like, the image of having a garden that's growing outside of the building, we essentially do that with a purpose community. And we take the ideas and the people that are sparked by the most, alive energy and ideas that further the positive impact and the mission of the company. And through their personal purpose and their skills and the company objectives, that community grows and takes on a life of its own that then helps infuse more life into the organization. So it's really complementary. It's not threatening the structure. It's complementary to. That's actually what I did at Korn Ferry, where I worked. That group in January 2016 of 10 of us then grew to 200 of us over the course of a little over a year. And we were working on projects fueled by our own personal purpose and values to achieve, outcomes that were fueled by purpose. And so I looked at what I did inside the company, and we looked at a lot of the research of how companies that we had worked with and studied and their culture, and how our methodology, we could do that in a more deliberate way. And the difference is when a company has a purpose or mission, and the company has the true north, but they don't know how to get there, or they want to get there faster, but the intention's there. That's really the work that we do.
That's so interesting. I just love it. And that is such an interesting path, because one of the questions I usually ask, and I'm asking here, is how can we co-create or design like the new, bringing all this ancient wisdom, and it's the way you're already doing that, it's like, we don't need to wait, but you realized this some years ago, and you're taking it into the corporate world, because that's how we bring the new into the systems that we are in there, or how can we bring that into education, into the corporate world, into everything that is around us to create something new.
Mm.
That how do you see like that methodology of bringing that connection to the ancient wisdom, taking it to other places, like how can we touch so much that they can get connected to this? Because I see the importance is so, because we all got disconnected, and then
Yeah.
we go down back to those roots, understanding who we are and why are we here, and just remember we can create.
Yeah, I mean that's we need that, right? Like I believe, so much of in Shakti we talk about the hero's
Yeah.
journey, and we brought a lot of the hero's journey into our work. And I do believe, we've been on this journey, kind of humanity is journeyed away from our connection to nature into the concrete jungle, and the wisdom of the forest brings us home. But I do think there's like the return home to nature that is happening, and I think a lot of us in the past year of COVID have woken up to that, like, oh, you can gather outside, but it's not as safe to gather inside. Like, we can't do these large gatherings, but we can connect with smaller groups. We can, when it's safer, to do that, or taking a walk through the woods and just what that does to ground you in such a, unsettling time. I think the access to nature is a privilege, and it shouldn't be. Like, nature and wellness should be accessible to everyone. I think it's hard for us to get in touch with our ancestral wisdom if we're in such a manufactured environment. And so the more we connect with nature, and we're in the process of moving to a community that's really built around nature, and 70% of the land is conservation, and it's very intentional. There's a farm, and we bike to the farm and we bike to school. And so just in the short time that we're, part of this community, and we're like in the midst of the move right now, but we're getting entrenched in the community. I see so many of the people there really have made that deliberate shift to being connected to the land, connected to nature. And so they're more in touch with their ancestral wisdom. I do think, when we talk about our roots and our values and our ancestors, there's also a lot of pain there, right? There's a lot of trauma. And also just like what we're seeing today in all of the violence in the US, and just like mental health crises, and how much we've just divided and we aren't speaking to one another, and not really seeing the other as human. We have so much to work through. And thinking about, sometimes it's so overwhelming to sit with what you have now that you can't even go back into the past, right? And so much of what we're trying to do is be present in the present moment. So it sounds like the wrong answer to say we need to connect with the past, right?
Yeah.
But I think when we can be present with who we are, and we can, get clear and get right with ourselves in the present moment, like taking care of our mind, our body, and our spirit in the present moment, then we can start to bring back, where did this come from? We can start to connect with our true nature and where it came from, and it just comes back in. So I think, connecting, like, what are we doing now? How do we connect with the land? How do we connect with what we're putting into our bodies and what we're consuming in our minds? And then when we start to clean that out, we create more space for, cleansing and healing our wounds that prevent us from connecting to our ancestral wisdom. I also say with roots, like with trees that have messy root systems are stronger.
Oh, wow.
So
that's interesting. Okay.
You're also not supposed to dig up the roots and look at them like for the tree to work, you have to stay grounded in the earth. So we don't have to dig up all of our trauma and revisit it. We can cleanse and take care of ourselves and appreciate, and I'm not a trauma therapist, so I don't mean to suggest that I have those answers, but I do think there's something to be said of just like recognizing that if your roots are messy, that makes you stronger if you take care of yourself. Right? Like, because you have been through so much, you are more resilient if you take care of your body, mind, and spirit. And that's my vantage point. That might not resonate with others. You know, we all have different experiences we've been through. So I recognize that's one person's perspective.
I love that. And you know, like talking, because all these talks that I had with different perspectives of how they bring or how they get in touch with this ancestral wisdom, I can found a lot of that in different ways, but people getting in touch because it this energy of the ancestral wisdom, it brings a lot of healing, but sometimes a lot of healing through the grieving and the pain, but in a beautiful way. Like you say, it doesn't have to be something so deep and painful that just no, it can be of just taking care of yourself. And there is other ways and tools. There is this amazing woman from Scotland that I got connected through Rebecca Saltman, and she brings she actually is an expert in trauma and healing trauma, like you were talking, and she uses sound and chants, very sound and chants, and she's searching about her own ancestral chants for grieving and bringing it, but you can see you can heal that in a beautiful way, connecting to the senses, to the sound. It doesn't have to be something painful. So when I see that you can connect to this energy, there is always something, even if it is painful, there is always something beautiful, playful to do with that, you know, and that's so it has both sides. The side of the cycle, it's like the cyclical thing of nature, life and death, but you can just kind of go through it in a very, I don't know, yeah, right? You know, like yes, like composting, but in a beautiful way. And of course, we're dealing with grieving, but it's amazing. So I love it how you put it.
Yeah, I do think too, like something practical we can do, because there's, I mean, I appreciate you saying I'm bringing ancestral wisdom into companies, because I don't, I haven't thought about it that way, you know?
You are.
But it is just I think the key is that our ancestors were in tune with nature, right? Like when we go back, like they rose and slept with the sun, right? And like before we had electricity, like they had no choice. Their food was in tune with the cycles and the earth and what would grow. And so we've just gotten away from that. And so just by connecting to the land and like, I'm a novice farmer, but we're now in this community and I'm getting more experience, and I'm trying to not be so afraid, like just learn and grow. I don't have to start with the seed and grow everything from scratch, right? Like I can learn from others. I can start with a seedling and keep that alive. And, you know, so, but I do think like getting in touch with what is growing where we live, what are the native plants and what can they be used for? That's something else that I'm also trying to learn about and get in touch with. And even though my ancestors didn't live here, like that is something, that practice of being connected to the land and what is native helps connect me with the true nature of being human. And I am just beginning to do that. So I can't tell you all about native plants, but I hope one day I can tell you more.
I know, but that is amazing. And I can see there is a lot of, especially after all this pandemic and everything that humanity is going through, there is a movement of people wanting to get more in touch, going back from the cities, going back to nature, or going back to your family. and that's something that it was kind of, we all got disconnected in some way. Like, okay,
Right.
let's go to our own work and let's go far away from family and let's go and live in the city and let's go and have this and access to that. But it's like, okay, we realize that no,
We
we
need to
all
return home.
must return home. Yes. And I love
Yeah. Hopefully we will remember that lesson and return home.
right. Oh, yeah, I love it. And wow, I think this conversation has been just amazing. And just saying like return home, it feels like that's one. It seems so simple, but it's so hard to do it sometimes. I think we'll have to go through a pandemic sometimes,
Hmm.
suffer, and
Right.
right, to realize like, okay, this is what we need. This is too crazy life that we're living here. Human beings, we invented this crazy system and life because we invented. Nobody put us here. They put us in a beautiful land,
Right.
earth that we
We
don't value.
tore it
And we
apart.
invented all this craziness, and suddenly it's like, oh no, we need to go back with home, and this
Yeah.
is where we are.
It's like we created Disney World and we can't even go now.
I know what for, right?
Well, I guess you can go now, but anyway.
Yeah, yeah, it's true.
Yeah, it's funny, this idea of returning home. I don't normally talk about that as much. So it's not, but
Huh?
in the course of thinking about my work as ancestral wisdom, and
It is.
you're really challenging me to think about that more. It's like, um, being at home with ourselves, right? Like as children, we start out being at home with ourselves.
Mhm.
We're at home in our mother's womb,
Yeah.
right? And we're actually at home as an egg in our grandmother, right? In our mother's womb, and our mother is born with all her eggs. So we're born in our maternal grandmother's womb.
Yes.
And so, like, where did home originate for us is in our maternal grandmother's womb.
Hmm.
I've never thought about that, but the like being at home with ourselves, being at home in our mind, being at home in our bodies, being at home in our surroundings, and when we've spent so much time at home, um, just being able to find peace at home and not searching for it somewhere else.
Right.
Um, it's funny, I finished yoga school in
Uh-huh.
the pandemic. We were supposed to finish in April, and so the last month was virtual. And one of my yoga school sisters, we actually finished on June 21st, the solstice, the same day as the Shakti.
Yeah.
And it was amazing because I had 18 women locally through the yoga school,
Oh,
and
wow.
then 18 women through Shakti globally. So just a beautiful time. And one of my yoga sisters made these bracelets for us, and we were supposed to pick an intention to end our yoga school of what we're focused on. And my word was home.
Oh,
And it
wow.
was really about this idea of just like being at home and trusting that I can be the mother I want to be to my 3 young boys during a pandemic, and that I'm not going to show up as a monster. Like maybe at times I did, but it got better, and it got better, not worse. And so, like, being able to be at home and trust that I could be who I want to be at home,
Mhm.
and being at home with myself, and just surrendering to being home, surrendering my work and being at home, surrendering that everything was at home, right? And it's so funny because I said the bracelet was so powerful because now we've sold our home and we're in the midst of this move, and we're renting a house. We don't know where we're going to land, but we're just trusting that home will find us. So I
Yeah.
love thinking about this concept of home, and thank you for giving it even more meaning.
I love it. And you're right. I think we all are searching for that. And sometimes home is just inside us. And because you're making me realize at the same time, I always deal with this home for a long time. I'm originally from Colombia, left my country many years ago. I went and lived in Brazil. I lived in Spain. I came back to Colombia. Now I'm in the US. And I always have this feeling that it's like, oh my God, I left home. And, it's like, yeah, I'm a citizen of the world, but home
Mm.
Stay back there. And it's not true. Home is here in my heart with my memories, with all this, and this is why the need of bringing back
Mm.
memories of my grandmas and who I really am and what is my land, even if I'm not there, I'm not there, but they are with me. They are in my soul. They are in my DNA. They are
Mm.
in my heart. And that's the way you find home, because then you
Yeah,
can, anywhere you go you can build home, you can feel
right.
like home, but you have to bring those memories, those
Mm.
little things that remember you, like, okay, and my house is full of those memories because I need to
Mm.
feel it, it's like, okay, I need to feel in everything I put out there that
Right.
this is home. Yeah.
Yeah, that's beautiful. It's like the altar of
Yes.
home that you can set up wherever you go.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I think about like, what would your grandmothers do if they left Colombia
Right.
and found themselves, right? Like, what would they be doing?
Right. Yes.
You know,
And
like finding the native, finding the community, finding like
yes.
however our
Planting
ancestors
flowers
knew,
or plant. Yes. Yes.
like what they knew how to grow something from the seed.
Yes, they will. Oh, they knew. Yeah. Like my grandma, one of them, they will always, she was amazing. You just also remind me, she used to tell us, like, because I traveled so much, bring me seeds from other countries. From, it's like eat a fruit and keep the seed, and she will plant that seed, even if it was a different climate, I don't know, but she would
Yeah.
grow these special things that it wasn't supposed to grow in this place because the climate is not the right one, but she
So
was
wood?
so connected to the sea.
Wow.
I know, and she was always planting all these different flowers or fruits from all different places. She was always asking for seeds. Yeah, so
That's amazing.
it was amazing. Yes,
Wow.
yeah, so
Wow.
connected. So yeah, so there is so much to learn from our own
Mm.
grandmothers and from our own ancestors, from our own story that we are always searching out there, and
Yeah.
yeah, just you have it right there. It's with you and always being with you.
Well, it's funny. My grandmother, Evelyn Harriet Shenfield, was my maternal grandmother,
Mhm.
and I have three boys, so I never got to use the names that I had planned for
Oh,
a
I
girl.
love your grandma.
But my middle child, Chase, is Chase Shenfield. Uh,
Oh, okay.
but but I think about so much of the sacrifice that our grandmothers or just the women throughout our family and all of our families, the sacrifices they made and how much is not written in the stories about them because they were behind the scenes, they were home. And I think about, just with my own mother, how much she equipped us with that moral compass and, you know, just the little things that she did to make sure we were most focused on how we were being more than what we were doing or
Yeah.
what we were achieving. And I think about the sense and the feeling of just being in my grandmother's presence and her, what we called her sixth sense, or she had ESP, or, we had these like, wait, but she was just so in tune. She just had such a strong sense of intuition. And, she had endured a lot physically, having polio at a young age and just throughout life had to deal with the repercussions of that. At 5, she didn't think she would walk, and she was lucky to regain use of her legs. But she always had trouble with her feet, and just there was a lot she couldn't do physically. And I think about just the times I would sit with her as a child, and I would take care of her when she was bedridden, and I would, put her in the bath before I would go to, or after I would come home from school and take her out of the bath. I would cut her hair. I would file her fingernails. Like I can feel the feeling of her fingernails, and just caring for her. And it was such a spiritual time of just communing with her. Um, and just like the most, um, just the richest time in my life because of just that deep connection and how much I was serving her. And I think about that as like just a meditative state that, if I were to sit and meditate, that's kind of that feeling I'm always trying to get to, is just that being in, communing with my grandmother and serving her. And so, I think I'm going to just start focusing on that in my morning meditations. I'm realizing that feeling is really what I'm longing for in meditation, but just talking about her brings that. I can see myself in her room, with her.
It feels so peaceful. It feels like so, yes. And that's something you should search, because always that, I think it's probably the second time or third time that I hear that story of your amazing grandma. What a powerful soul she was and she is. And after going through all that, and even, like, to build a family, you're here. That is amazing. And that feeling, that's something that we have to go and search every day in those meditations, for sure.
Well, there's so much of what she could have done that, she chose to be home with the children, and she could have done a lot of things out there in the world, but she took care of her family. And sometimes it's hard for us to really honor that role. It's something that I've struggled with myself,
Yep.
So.
Yeah. And this is why we're here, to honor the grandmothers and everything they taught us and what they represent. To each of us, not everybody had a great experience, but universally, yeah, it's this love and this caring and this power at the same time, because they were powerful women and very intuitive and very wise. So, Elaine, thank you for sharing this beautiful story. Thank you for sharing all your journey and the beautiful work that you're doing in the world. Because, yeah, even if you didn't realize, you are really bringing ancestral wisdom into the system, into the corporate, to the leaders of the world. That's what we need. It cannot stay just home, but we need to take home to that part and bring that feeling and create that love and that caring inside, and making a more human world. So thank
It's
you.
interesting, making work feel more like home.
Right? Yeah, that's what we need. So really, any last message you want to give? Like, we're celebrating International Women's Month. Anything that you want to just say and share?
Well, let's see. I was going to share my paternal grandmother. She was pretty remarkable too, and just, her husband died 20 years before she did, or more, and she developed such a strong independence. And we'd say that you could put her in a room with nothing but a deck of cards, and she would say, "Oh, what fun, we can play cards." And she would always say, "What fun." And she just had this way of just making possibility out of nothing, And so I would say the words of "what fun," and just creating, just when we look at a normal everyday, and we just kind of approach it with a "what fun" attitude, that can shift everything. And so that's something I learned from her. And my maternal grandmother, Nani, who I was talking about, she would say, "Go against the grain." Go against the grain, and just, listening to yourself. Everyone's moving in one direction. Sometimes that doesn't mean it's the right direction to move. Go against the grain. And so I guess I'll just leave with those two pieces of ancestral wisdom that I often think about.
Oh, that's so beautiful and so needed. Yeah, go against the grain, because we all like follow everything everybody's doing, and let's find our own way. Thank you for that. That is so beautiful. If people want to find you, connect to Kindred Lane or to your work, where can we find you so we can spread your
Sure.
work out there?
So we don't have a big social media presence, especially the past year when I've been home with the kids more. But the @Kindred Lane, so Kind Red Lane, Kindred Lane, on any of the platforms. is where you can find us. And I'm Elaine at kindredlane.com if anyone wants to send me a message. So thank you so much, Monica. It's just
Thank you so
a
much.
pleasure. Anytime we connect is wonderful. And I'm grateful to be part of this project and just so inspired by you listening to your ancestral wisdom and the profound work that you're doing and how your grandmothers are, speaking and moving through you. So thank you for what you're offering. I know you're putting a lot into it.
Yeah, a lot of love and time that I really create space to bring that. And thank you for being part as well, for participating, bringing all your stories, sharing your wisdom, and because at the end it's kind of we're doing the same, each of us in our own way and the way we found. But that's my feeling, it's like, oh my God, so much synchronicity here. The first time I met you and everything you're doing is like, okay, it is almost like we had the same experiences. We just are developing ourselves our unique way. So
yes, you're
thank
a kindred spirit for sure.
oh, for sure. And come with me anytime and we will keep connected. Thank you
Great.
for everything. Have a good, excellent rest of the day. Enjoy your kids. And
Thank you, Monica.
bye. Take
Take
care.
care.